Okay, you can see from this picture that the mycelia here is what is its ground level or underneath, and then the mycelia produce these purple structures. So for this fungus, this is your fruiting body. Again, I said it just on the last slide, but your reproductive structures are called the fruiting body, although they're going to change from phyla to phyla. We're going to go through each one of these phylum. Each one of them has a different name for the fruiting body. So fruiting body is just a general name for the above ground structure that is capable of reproducing. Okay, these again are going to be the parts that we see. So note that any fungus that you see, whether it be in your shower, or on your skin, or a mushroom, or whatever, what you're looking at is the reproductive structure. What you're not seeing is the true body of the fungus, which is your mycelium. All right, now we are just giving some general information about each one of these, but we will take the phyla one at a time and go over its features. So for asexual reproduction, there's a process called budding. This is the way that yeast reproduces, and you can see here that the yeast are forming these little yellow buds, and those little yellow buds are going to drop off and they're going to become new yeast. Budding is asexual, and so it's just a part of where the yeast pinches itself off and the offspring becomes a new cell. All right, there's another kind of asexual reproduction called fragmentation. Fragmentation is where the septate hyphae, now these are the ones that have the cross walls, the hyphae dries up and it just shatters. And when it shatters, it just releases all kinds of individual cells that produce spores. And this is going to be forming new fruiting bodies after the fragmentation. This is the way that athlete's foot reproduces. So that hyphae, when it dries up, it just fragments, and every one of the fragments becomes a new fruiting body. All right, asexually, the fungi can produce thousands of haploid spores. So the haploid spores, as you can see here, are going to be forming on modified cells that are on the hyphae. So the hyphae itself is all the individual thread-like filaments, and they're going to produce spores. Now on this one, the spores are called conidia, and they're going to germinate, they're going to form into a new mycelia, and then a new hyphae is going to sprout up. When the spores are in favorable conditions, now this is asexual, favorable conditions. When there's unfavorable conditions, which means that it's too dry or the weather isn't warm, it's too cold or something like that, there's not enough water, then they're going to reproduce sexually. But in favorable conditions for a fungus, they're going to reproduce asexually. So when the spores are placed in favorable environmental conditions, they're going to germinate, which means they're going to break out, and they're going to grow new hyphae. So it's just a very simple procedure, and the new hyphae can produce thousands and thousands and thousands of new spores. So just like with the mushroom has got the spores underneath the cap, and wind and water are going to be the two most common ways of dispersal of spores. And so the wind's going to come along, it's going to blow the spore, and then it's going to land on favorable conditions. And if it does, then we're going to have a new basidia. All right, a variety of asexual spores are formed by different fungi. So here you can see a completely different one. Now, sporangiophores. So the spore-producing structure that's above the ground is called a sporangiophore. This is your sporangiophore. And it's made of specialized hyphae that make it look, in these upright stalks here. And at the end of the sporangiform is a sac called a sporangium. This is going to be the same for every phylum. It just changes names. So the sporangium is going to contain the spores. Inside each, the spores named now are going to be sporangiospores. So you have the sporangia 4 pH, that is the upright stalk. You have the structure at the end that's sac-like holding the spores called the sporangium, and then the spores are called sporangiospores. This is going to be the same with every phylum. It's just going to change names. So they have a name for the above ground structure. It always ends in 4, P-H-O-R-E. And then there's going to be a sac-like structure at the top. And then the spores are going to follow the phylum name. It's just going to end with spore. All right, Rhizopus. This is actually Rhizopus stolonifer, S-T-O-L-O-N-I-F-E-R, underlined. This is the black mold, and this is bread mold. So this is found. This is what it looks like over here to the right, and it's found growing on the bread. Now, these stalks here that you see, they are called sporangiophores. The black that you see is called the sporangium. And then the sporangium will break open the sac and release the spores, which are called sporangiospores. All right, now there are some other fungus that form spores called conidia. And this is formed without a sac. So conidia, you can see here, they're just formed on top of the stalk. And in this particular instance, the stalk is called a conidiophore. The conidiophore is the upright stalk, and the spores are actually formed from these conidias. So this is going to be formation without a sac, and some reproduce that way. Penicillium, it's really Penicillium notatum, N-O-T-A-T-U-M. This is the fungus that produces and produced the first antibiotic that we know is penicillin. So this is what you see. It's the green that you see on the outside of oranges, and it also can be on certain types of cheeses. And this is a type of fungus that is going to reproduce by means of conidia. So if there is no sac, then this is your conidiophore. The conidia is going to be formed at the top, and the conidia spores are going to be produced.